The night had fallen heavy over the quiet neighborhood of Cedarfield, a small American town where the sound of crickets was usually the loudest noise after dark. But inside the Dawson home, the silence was different, thick, uneasy, and electric. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a long-married couple. It was the silence of two people living in the same house but separated by invisible walls of suspicion. Claire Dawson sat in the living room, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, 10:43 p.m. Her husband, Peter, wasn't home yet. He'd said he had a late meeting, but it was the third one that week. The excuses had begun to sound rehearsed, and the smell of perfume on his jacket 2 nights earlier wasn't hers. They'd been married for 22 years. Once, Peter's laughter had filled the house. They'd been partners, building a life, raising their daughter, navigating the usual storms of adulthood. But somewhere along the line, routine replaced affection, and silence replaced laughter. Lately, Peter had been guarded. His phone never left his pocket. He took long walks after dinner, answering calls in hushed tones. When Claire asked, he smiled too quickly and changed the subject. That evening, as rain began tapping against the window, Claire's phone buzzed, a text from her mother, Evelyn. "Evelyn, I'm thinking of visiting this weekend. You sound so tense on the phone, sweetheart." Claire hesitated before replying. Her mother's visits were always complicated. Evelyn was elegant, commanding, and sometimes overbearing. Even in her 60s, she carried herself like someone half her age, confident, sharp, and painfully observant. Still, maybe company would help. Maybe it would keep her from overthinking. "Of course, Mom," Claire typed back. "It'll be good to have you." By the time Peter returned, it was after midnight. His hair was damp from the rain, and his shirt clung to his chest. He smiled faintly, avoiding her eyes. "Meeting ran late," he said, shrugging off his jacket. Claire didn't answer. She simply nodded and turned back to the dimly lit TV, her wine untouched. He hesitated, then headed upstairs. That night, Claire lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of rain against the roof, and the strange, cold distance between their breaths. Evelyn arrived 2 days later, unannounced, a day earlier than planned. Her appearance was as striking as ever, her silver hair swept into a neat bun, her perfume lingering in the air like memory itself. "Claire, darling," she exclaimed, sweeping her daughter into an embrace. Her eyes darted around the house, scanning for signs of neglect or tension. When Peter appeared in the doorway, Evelyn's smile softened. "Peter," she said warmly. "Still as handsome as ever." Peter chuckled. "You're too kind, Evelyn. It's good to see you." Something unspoken passed between them, a flicker, barely noticeable, but Claire saw it. A look that lingered a moment too long. Over the next few days, the house filled with polite conversation and brittle laughter. Evelyn cooked elaborate dinners, Peter helped her open wine bottles, and Claire watched from the sidelines, uneasy. Late one evening, she walked into the kitchen for water and heard whispers, Evelyn's voice, low and trembling, and Peter's calm reply. "Someone might hear us," Evelyn murmured. "No one's awake," Peter said quietly. Claire froze. The sound of their voices, so close, so intimate, sliced through her. She backed away, heart pounding, the water glass trembling in her hand. In the reflection of the dark window, her own face stared back at her, pale, hollow-eyed, and suddenly certain of the truth. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was having one with her mother. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, soft and golden, but it did nothing to warm the chill in Claire's chest. She stood at the counter, stirring her coffee though she had no intention of drinking it. Peter sat across from her, reading the paper as if nothing had changed. Evelyn hummed at the stove, flipping pancakes, her perfume mingling with the scent of butter and maple syrup. To anyone else, it would have looked like an ordinary family breakfast. But to Claire, every sound, every gesture, felt like a lie. She studied them. The way her mother's hand brushed Peter's shoulder as she passed the plate. The way Peter smiled faintly without looking up. They didn't speak much, but the air between them buzzed with something Claire could no longer ignore. She forced herself to eat, her fork scraping the plate. "You two seem to be getting along well," she said, keeping her tone light. Evelyn looked up, smiling. "It's nice to have some company, dear. You're always so busy." Peter folded his paper. "Your mother's been helping me organize the garage. I finally found that old toolbox I'd been looking for." Claire nodded, her throat tight. "The garage," she repeated softly, her eyes flicking toward Evelyn. The moment hung heavy, just long enough for both of them to sense the edge beneath her words. After breakfast, Claire slipped into her study and closed the door. Her hands trembled as she opened Peter's laptop. He rarely left it unattended, but that morning, he had. The screen came to life with a quiet hum. She hesitated. She wasn't proud of what she was about to do, but the truth was already clawing its way to the surface. She opened his email, his messages, his calendar. Nothing. Then she found a folder labeled simply "Work Trips." Inside were receipts, all dated within the last 2 months, fancy restaurants, hotels, even one for a weekend spa retreat. All were signed in his handwriting. But there was no record of any of these business meetings in his company's emails. And then she saw it, a message in his private inbox, buried deep in the trash folder. From Evelyn Harper, subject, "Last night, message, we have to be careful. She's starting to notice." Claire's hand covered her mouth as if to hold back a scream. The screen blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She deleted nothing, changed nothing, just closed the laptop and sat in silence. Her mind raced back through the last few weeks, the late-night calls, the sudden cheer in her mother's voice whenever Peter entered a room, the mysterious outings. It all fit now. By evening, she had almost convinced herself to confront them. Almost. But when she heard them laughing in the living room, that small, easy laughter she hadn't heard in years, something inside her broke. She didn't storm in. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked out the back door, stepping barefoot into the cool grass. The sun was setting behind the trees, and the sound of cicadas filled the air. Her heart thudded painfully as she whispered to herself, "Not my husband. Not my mother." She felt dizzy, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Over the next few days, Claire moved like a ghost through her own house. She watched, listened, and waited. Evelyn stayed longer than she'd planned, claiming she wanted to help with the house. Peter didn't object, in fact, he seemed grateful. Every night, Claire heard the same pattern, the creak of floorboards, the faint sound of whispers downstairs, then silence. One night, she couldn't take it anymore. She slipped out of bed and crept down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The kitchen light was on, dim and yellow. She peered around the corner. Evelyn stood close to Peter, her hand resting on his chest. "Please," she whispered, "we have to stop this. It's wrong." Peter's voice was low, steady. "You say that every time." "I mean it, Peter," Evelyn breathed. "Claire's my daughter. And you're the one who called me," he said. "You came here." Evelyn turned away, shaking her head, her voice breaking. "I know. I can't lose you." Claire's vision blurred, her pulse hammering in her ears. She backed away slowly, holding her breath, praying they wouldn't hear her. When she finally reached the safety of her bedroom, she sank to the floor, her body shaking. The truth was no longer a shadow, it was real, and it was destroying her from the inside out. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance and rain began to fall again, she whispered to the darkness, "Something has to give. Neither she nor the storm outside knew just how soon it would. The following days were a blur of polite pretense and quiet torment. Claire moved through her home as if she were walking on glass, careful, deliberate, afraid that one wrong word might shatter the fragile illusion they were all living in. Evelyn stayed longer than she'd promised. She claimed she was helping Claire redecorate, but it was clear she was helping herself to something else entirely: late-night conversations, shared secrets, stolen glances. Peter, once distant and cautious, now seemed oddly lighter, almost carefree. He whistled while shaving, lingered over breakfast, and even started wearing cologne again. To the outside world, he looked like a man rediscovering life. But Claire knew, he was rediscovering passion, and not with her. The tension between mother and daughter grew thick enough to taste. Every meal felt like a silent interrogation. Every word carried double meaning. Evelyn often tried to break the tension with small talk, but Claire could hear the tremor beneath her mother's cheerful tone. One morning, while folding laundry, Claire found one of Peter's shirts tucked into the wrong basket, her mother's. The scent of Evelyn's perfume clung to the fabric. She stared at it for a long moment, then slowly pressed the shirt to her face, inhaling the proof she'd been dreading. Her heart felt like glass ready to crack. That evening, Peter came home late again, rain dripping from his coat. Claire stood by the window, watching the storm roll in. When he entered, she didn't turn around. "Rough night?" she asked quietly. He froze for half a second. "Yeah. Late meeting again. You should take an umbrella next time," she said. "You never know when the storm's coming." He glanced at her, sensing something in her tone, but before he could respond, Evelyn appeared in the doorway. "I made tea," she said softly, her eyes darting between them. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath. Claire forced a smile. "Perfect timing, Mother. Just what we all need." They sat together in the living room, sipping tea as thunder rolled in the distance. Rain streaked the windows, the sound filling the silence they couldn't break. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she set her cup down. Peter cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began cautiously, "we could use a change. Maybe a trip, somewhere quiet. The three of us." Claire's jaw tightened. "A trip? That's what you think we need?" He blinked. "It might help us reconnect." "Reconnecting," Claire repeated, her eyes locked on his. Interesting word choice. Evelyn looked down at her hands. "Maybe we should." "No, Mother," Claire interrupted sharply. "Let him finish. I'd love to hear how a vacation is supposed to fix a marriage you've both already destroyed." The words cut through the air like glass breaking. Peter's face drained of color. Evelyn froze, her lips parting but no sound coming out. Claire stood, her voice trembling but firm. "I know everything. The phone calls. The messages. The nights you thought I was asleep. I know what you've done, both of you." Rain hammered against the windows, thunder roaring above them. No one moved. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "Claire, please. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Claire said. "You couldn't stand being irrelevant, could you? You had to take what little happiness I had left." Peter tried to stand, but Claire's glare stopped him cold. "Don't," she warned. "Don't you dare touch me." The room fell into an awful stillness. Outside, lightning illuminated their faces, Peter pale and shaking, Evelyn in tears, and Claire trembling with fury she could no longer contain. "I want you out of my house," Claire said to her mother. "Tonight." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "Where am I supposed to go in the middle of a storm?" Claire's voice cracked. "Anywhere but here." Without another word, she stormed upstairs, leaving them in stunned silence. Hours later, the house lay in darkness. The storm raged harder, wind howling through the trees. Claire sat on the edge of her bed, her heart still pounding. From downstairs, she could hear muffled voices, urgent, low, and intimate. She gripped the heavy brass candle holder from her nightstand, not because she planned to use it, but because the weight in her hand made her feel steadier, stronger. Then she heard it, her mother's laughter, faint but unmistakable. That sound, that betrayal wrapped in mirth, ignited something deep inside her. She rose, trembling, and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet as she moved toward the sound of their voices. The thunder outside grew louder, closer, as if the night itself was holding its breath. And downstairs, in the flicker of candlelight, the storm within her was about to break. The storm outside had turned violent. Wind lashed against the windows, branches scratched the glass like claws, and thunder cracked so close it rattled the walls. Inside the Dawson home, the lights flickered, then went out entirely, plunging everything into darkness except for the faint orange glow of candles flickering in the living room. Claire stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the brass candle holder. Her breath came shallow, every nerve in her body alive with rage and disbelief. Below her, she heard voices, Peter's calm, steady tone and Evelyn's trembling one. "Claire's not herself lately," Peter said softly. "I know," Evelyn replied. "She suspects something. She doesn't have proof." "She doesn't need proof," Evelyn whispered. "A woman always knows." That was enough. Claire descended the stairs slowly, the wooden steps creaking under her bare feet. Her shadow swayed on the wall beside her, long and unsteady in the candlelight. When she reached the bottom, they both turned, startled, guilty, like children caught in the act. "Couldn't sleep?" Peter asked, voice tight. Claire's gaze moved from his face to Evelyn's. Her mother's robe was loosely tied, her hair falling over her shoulders. The sight twisted something deep in her chest. "I heard voices," Claire said evenly. "Didn't want to interrupt your little midnight meeting." Evelyn stood quickly. "Claire, listen to me." "No," Claire said sharply. "You don't get to talk." The wind roared outside, making the house tremble. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Peter sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "There's no easy way to explain this." Claire let out a bitter laugh. "You think I want an explanation? You've been sleeping with my mother, Peter. What part of that has an easy explanation?" Evelyn stepped forward, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "A mistake? You destroyed my marriage, my life, and you call it a mistake?" Peter reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "Don't touch me," she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. Lightning flashed, casting everything in blinding white for an instant. When it faded, the three of them stood motionless, a triangle of betrayal and fury. Evelyn's lip quivered. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Claire. I swear." Claire's laugh was hollow. "You've been hurting me my entire life, Mother. Every time you needed attention, every time you needed to prove you were still desirable, and now you've proven it. Congratulations." Peter stepped between them, his voice rising. "That's enough. This isn't helping anyone." "Helping?" Claire's tone turned icy. "You think I care about helping you now?" The wind howled through a cracked window, blowing out one of the candles. The room dimmed further, shadows moving like ghosts around them. "I loved you, Peter," Claire said quietly. "Even when things got hard, I stayed. I tried. And you," her voice cracked. "You chose her." Peter took a step forward. "It just happened. I didn't plan." "Don't say that," she hissed. "Don't you dare say it just happened." Evelyn began to cry. "Claire, please. Let's just talk." But the word please, gentle, pleading, only made something inside Claire snap. She felt her grip tighten around the brass candle holder, its weight grounding her fury. The storm outside reached its peak, thunder clapping so loudly it shook the walls. And then, in one sudden, uncontrollable motion, Claire raised her arm. Peter's eyes widened in shock, his mouth parting to speak, but no words came. The candleholder came down with a sickening thud. The sound echoed, once, twice, and then all was still except for the roar of the wind outside. Claire stood frozen, her breath ragged, the candleholder slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. Peter collapsed, his body limp, his eyes open but unseeing. Evelyn gasped, her scream muffled by her trembling hands. "Oh my God, what have you done?" Claire stared at the motionless form on the floor, her mind a blur of noise and silence. She didn't feel the tears streaming down her face. She didn't feel anything at all. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's finally over." Evelyn dropped to her knees beside Peter, trying to feel for a pulse, but there was none. "Claire, listen to me, we need to call someone." Claire shook her head, stepping back, her voice distant and flat. "No. No police. No one can know. Claire, please." "I said no," she shouted. "No one can know what happened here." The storm continued to rage outside, lightning illuminating the horror in Evelyn's eyes. Claire turned toward the stairs, her movements mechanical, her voice cold. "I'll fix it. I'll clean everything. You just, stay out of my way." Evelyn covered her mouth, sobbing. "Claire, he's dead. You killed him." But Claire didn't answer. As she disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, Evelyn's sobs were drowned out by the sound of rain beating against the windows, relentless, merciless, as if the night itself was trying to wash the blood away. The storm howled deep into the night as if nature itself bore witness to the horror that had unfolded inside the Dawson home. Rain battered the windows, thunder cracked, and the power had long since gone out, leaving the house cloaked in darkness and silence, except for the faint, uneven breathing of two women bound by a secret too terrible to speak aloud. Claire stood in the hallway, her hands trembling, her face ghostly pale. The brass candleholder, slick with blood, lay abandoned near Peter's body. The metallic scent of it mingled with the damp air, seeping into the carpet, into her skin, into everything. She stared at her husband's still form. The man she had shared her life with. The man she had loved and lost long before she ever struck him. Her pulse thudded in her ears, drowning out Evelyn's choked sobs. "Claire," Evelyn whispered, her voice raw. "We need to call the police. Tell them it was an accident." "No." Claire's voice was cold, controlled. "No one will believe it was an accident. You think they'll see this and believe that?" She pointed to the blood slowly spreading across the rug. "They'll think I planned it. That I snapped." Evelyn's hands shook. "Claire, please. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Claire interrupted. "He's gone. And I'm not spending the rest of my life in a cell because of what you two did." For a moment, the only sound was the relentless rain. Claire moved toward the kitchen, her movement steady now, as if a dark clarity had taken hold. She grabbed a roll of paper towels, cleaning spray, and garbage bags from under the sink. Evelyn followed her, sobbing. "Stop this," Evelyn pleaded. "You can't just pretend this didn't happen." Claire turned sharply. "You should have thought of that before you climbed into his bed." Evelyn's face twisted in pain. "Claire, I'm your mother." "Not anymore." The words hit like a slap. Evelyn staggered back, stunned into silence. Claire crouched beside Peter's body, her hands trembling as she began wiping away the blood. Each swipe left streaks that smeared more than they erased. She could still feel the faint warmth of his skin fading beneath her fingertips. Her vision blurred, but she kept going, whispering to herself over and over, "It's just a mess. It's just a mess. I can clean it." Evelyn stood frozen, horrified, as Claire dragged the rug to cover the worst of it. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "What are you going to do with him?" Claire didn't look up. "I'll take him to the cellar. No one ever goes down there." "You can't." "I can," Claire said sharply. "And you're going to help me?" Evelyn's breath hitched. "Claire." "Help me," Claire repeated, her voice rising. "Now." The storm masked the sounds of their struggle, the thuds, the scraping of furniture, the soft, wet drag of the body being moved across the hardwood floor. By the time they reached the cellar door, both women were drenched in sweat and tears. Claire flipped on the dim bulb overhead, revealing the narrow wooden stairs that led down into the cold, unfinished basement. The smell of damp earth rose up to meet them. Evelyn hesitated. "Claire, this isn't right." Claire turned, her expression hollow. "Nothing about this night is right." Together, they pulled Peter's body down the stairs, each thud echoing like a confession. When they reached the bottom, Claire found an old tarp, covered him, and stepped back. Her hands were streaked with red. She stared at them for a long time before finally whispering, "It's done." Evelyn stood a few steps above her, shaking. "Claire, please. Let me call someone." "You need help." "I don't need help," Claire said, her voice distant. "I just need time." She climbed back up, her eyes glassy, her face set with grim resolve. In the kitchen, she washed her hands until the water ran clear, then scrubbed the sink, the counter, even the faucet. She changed her clothes, tossing the blood-stained ones into a garbage bag. Every move was methodical, mechanical, like she was cleaning up after someone else. By the time the storm began to die, the house looked almost normal again. The body was hidden, the blood wiped, the silence restored. Evelyn sat at the table, head in her hands, her voice shaking. "Someone will come looking for him. You can't hide this forever." Claire looked at her, eyes flat and unreadable. "Then I'll think of something when they do." Outside, a car door slammed. Claire's head snapped toward the window. Through the rain-smeared glass, she saw the glow of headlights, their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, umbrella in hand, crossing the yard. A knock echoed through the house. Evelyn froze. "Oh, God." Claire forced a calm smile, smoothing her hair. "You don't say a word," she hissed. "You were asleep all night. Do you understand?" Evelyn nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Claire opened the door. Mrs. Higgins stood on the porch, her raincoat dripping. "Claire. Thank heaven someone's awake. This storm's a nightmare. Power's out all over town. You all right in there?" Claire smiled, her voice steady, almost kind. "We're fine, just riding it out." "Peter's asleep." Mrs. Higgins nodded, oblivious. "Well, I just wanted to check on you both. You know how these old houses get in storms, leaks, floods, you name it." "Thanks, but we're fine," Claire said smoothly. "Good night." As the neighbor disappeared into the rain, Claire closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. For a moment, she felt the house breathe again, as if it too were alive, trembling beneath the weight of their secret. She looked toward her mother, who sat trembling at the table. Evelyn whispered, "You can't keep this up. It'll eat you alive." Claire stared at her for a long moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe that's the point." And outside, the storm finally broke, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the steady tick of the clock, marking every passing second of a life that could never be cleaned away. The detectives entered the Dawson home just as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long golden beams across the floorboards where traces of blood had once been scrubbed away. Claire forced a calm smile, her heart thudding so violently it almost drowned out the creak of the door closing behind them. Detective Robert Hale was tall and sharp-eyed, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Detective Dana Myers carried a small notebook, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet precision. They introduced themselves politely, but there was a weight in their tone that made both women's stomachs twist. "Mrs. Dawson," Hale began, "we appreciate your time. We're following up on the missing persons report filed by Mr. Dawson's company. They're concerned since he hasn't been to work or returned calls in nearly a week." Claire nodded carefully, clasping her hands in front of her. "Yes, I understand. Peter's been under tremendous pressure lately. After the storm, he just left. Said he needed to clear his head." Myers tilted her head slightly. "And you haven't heard from him since?" "No," Claire replied, her voice steady. "But he's done this before. He gets restless." Hale's eyes flickered toward Evelyn, who sat stiffly at the table, her teacup trembling in her hands. "Mrs. Harper, is that your understanding as well?" Evelyn hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came. Claire's voice cut in smoothly. "My mother's been worried sick, of course. But I keep telling her, Peter's fine. He just needs time." The detectives exchanged a glance, the kind of silent communication that made Claire's stomach churn. "We'd like to take a look around," Hale said gently. "Just to make sure nothing's been overlooked. Storm like that can cause all sorts of damage, basements flooding, wiring issues, you name it." Claire froze. "Our basement's fine," she said quickly. "Just some water. Nothing serious." Myers smiled faintly. "Still, it's routine. Shouldn't take long." Claire's throat tightened. "You'll track mud all over the floor." Hale's expression didn't change. "We'll be careful, ma'am." Before she could object further, he was already moving toward the hallway. The old wooden steps creaked as he descended, the sound echoing faintly. Claire's pulse raced. She could still see it in her mind, the tarp, the dark stain that wouldn't scrub away no matter how hard she tried. Evelyn's whisper broke through the silence. "You should have told them." Claire turned to her sharply. "Not a word. Claire. Not a word." Downstairs, Hale's voice echoed faintly. "Dana, grab a light. There's some debris down here." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. She stood frozen in place, hands clenched, every second stretching into eternity. Then, a pause. Followed by a sound she dreaded, a sharp intake of breath, then Hale's voice, low and grim. "Dana, call it in." Evelyn's teacup slipped from her hands, shattering against the floor. Claire didn't move. Didn't breathe. The room tilted around her as if the air itself had been ripped away. Hours later, the sun had set again, painting the neighborhood in cold blue twilight. Police cars filled the street, their lights flashing silently. Neighbors gathered on porches, whispering, their faces pale and curious. Inside, the Dawson home was chaos, officers moving carefully through rooms, cameras flashing, tape being strung across doorways. The once pristine house now felt like a crime scene from someone else's life. Detective Hale stood by the window, watching as the coroner's team lifted a stretcher up the cellar stairs. Beneath the tarp lay what remained of Peter Dawson. Claire sat on the couch, her hands cuffed loosely in front of her, her face expressionless. Across the room, Evelyn sobbed quietly, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When Hale finally spoke, his tone was calm but firm. "Mrs. Dawson, we'll be taking you in for questioning. You understand your rights?" Claire nodded faintly. "Yes." Evelyn looked up suddenly. "It was an accident," she cried. "She didn't mean to." But Claire turned to her, eyes hollow. "Stop, Mother." Evelyn's breath caught. "I don't want your help anymore," Claire said softly. "You've done enough." As Hale led her toward the door, the sound of camera shutters clicked like distant gunfire. Neighbors whispered, faces pressed to the rain-streaked windows. Outside, as she was guided to the police car, Claire glanced up at the house, the home that had once been her whole world. Its windows glowed dimly, flickering with reflections of red and blue light. It looked smaller now, almost fragile. She whispered under her breath, not to the detectives, not to anyone in particular, but to herself, "It's finally quiet." The trial came months later. The courtroom was packed, a small-town spectacle wrapped in scandal and grief. The prosecution laid out a chilling story of betrayal, rage, and concealment. The affair between Evelyn Harper and Peter Dawson had been confirmed through text messages and emails recovered from both their phones. Forensic evidence, faint traces of blood beneath the floorboards, fragments of carpet fiber on the candleholder, sealed the case. Evelyn testified, her hands trembling. She described the argument, the blow, the panic. She tried to protect her daughter, but her words only deepened the tragedy. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Claire Dawson was found guilty of manslaughter and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in state prison. Evelyn never returned to the courtroom after the verdict. She left town quietly, her house sold, her name never spoken aloud again. Years passed. In prison, Claire lived a quiet, solitary life. She kept to herself, working in the library, avoiding conflict. The other inmates whispered about her, the woman who'd killed her husband after discovering the unthinkable, but she rarely spoke of it. Sometimes, at night, she would lie awake and listen to the hum of the distant highway beyond the walls. In those moments, she thought about her mother's perfume, the sound of rain against the windows, the candlelight on Peter's face. She didn't cry anymore. The tears had burned out long ago. In the quiet of her cell, she would close her eyes and whisper the same words she'd said that final night. "It's just a mess. I can clean it." But now she knew, some stains never fade. In the end, the house on Cedarfield Lane stood empty for years, its walls still echoing with secrets and storms. Neighbors said that when it rained, you could still see the flicker of candlelight through the windows, and hear faint footsteps moving across the floor. Whether it was guilt, memory, or something far darker, no one knew. But everyone in town remembered the Dawson tragedy, a story of silence, betrayal, and the terrible cost of love twisted into something it was never meant to be.